So the race begins. G4, B5, G5, B4. So black doesn't want to retreat and it continues fighting for D5 square. That's the idea, that's a plan. I was preparing with Boris Gelfand in summer 1998 while working at the training session before my aborted World Championship match with Alexei Shirov. Now white should disregard g takes f6 because after bc3, take on g7, bc3, bishop h6, black has very comfortable game. And there are two options, whether to go on d5 or on e2. I have to admit that knight d5 was not taken seriously at all while we were analyzing this position with Gelfand, because it seemed that after knight d5, exchange on d5 and bishop f5, black has no complaints at all. So it eliminated these two knights. That was a very good exchange because d5 square now is occupied by the pawn, and then after bishop d3, now the exchange bishop e7, it seemed quite favorable for black. And that's why we concentrate on knight e2, and we'll look at this position later on. But in fact, when Shirov was first confronted by this line in Vikhanzé 1999, and Swidler played this line with black, Shirov immediately went for knight d5. So it's not as easy as it looks, because obviously white also has its chances, its trumps. Potentially knight can go on e4. That's a pretty good square, and then maybe it can go on c4. We'll see in some lines that's also a good square, even protected by pawn b pawn. And of course, after h4, then black light pieces, they could be they could be kept fairly passive. Obviously, black is trying to play f5 to create chances on the king side. But if white kept this pawn on g5 supported by the pawn from h4, then the problem of activating bishop on e7 and knight on d7 is still very much to be resolved. So that's why I think h4 is a better move than rook g1, which was played by Leko against me in Linares 99, and then you will see there are a few other games, and some strong players like Adams and Ivanchuk played this move. But I guess that that's not as effective because after castles and on opposite sides, a5, knight d2, I think that king b1 leads literally to the same position if black plays a4 or even f5, so there's not much difference. So knight d2, f5, g f6, knight f6, king b1. And here it's either f4 as Adams played against Swidler. Swidler responded with knight d7. I think e takes f4 was also possible. That's what I was planning to play against Leko with this temporary piece sacrifice, which works after bishop f4, queen c7, or king b1, still queen c7, and then knight g6 and a4. After king b1, black plays, and rook g1, black plays knight h5. a4 is also possible, f4, knight d7, but it's always tempting to keep the pawn on f3. Leko played rook g4, activated his rook on the queen side, but as our game showed, and also the later game Karakin Najdorf, there is very little for black to worry. Our game ended in a draw with move repetition, but I think that's rook g1 line gives black pretty good comfortable game. So just back to 17 king b1, probably a4, knight d2, f5. That's a better option. Obviously, white could reduce black's option and avoid black knight on h5, which keeps pawn on f3. But if you look at these positions, you will discover that it's not as dangerous. So let's set it aside and move to h4, which is the in my view strongest move. Castles, a5, knight d2, now a4. f5 also possible, although I think we eventually reach the same positions after f4. But after f5, gf6, knight f6, h5, that's what happened in Swidler's game, this Shiro Swidler game above mentioned. Queen c8, h6, g6, and after rook a g1, knight h5 was a good move recommended by Swidler, because after king h8, f4, he was in trouble. So, and if rook dg1, preventing knight h5, then king h8, f4, and probably queen f5, and it's also not very clear. But another option is to play a4, and after h6, g6, knight c4, queen e8, and in the game New Aronian, black had quite, sufficient counterplay. But my plan was to play a4, knight to a4, and that's what's happened with another game I played against Leko. That was already Bled Olympiad in 2002. Leko switched from rook g1 to h4, and after king b1 f5, he didn't take on f6 because after knight f6 h5, now black can play a3 b3 rook a5, and you see this pawn now is suddenly in trouble. So that was my idea, just why I wanted to push a pawn. So Leko met it with f4, and that's exactly the positional threat I already mentioned, that having these pawns there, white creates problems for black light pieces to be activated. But still, there is another option to play knight c4, queen c7, rook h1, and then if knight is attacked, you can play b3. And I think that here black should be extremely cautious. That's not easy to find an active plan. So reducing black's active option is probably white's best bet. After f4, queen c7, knight c4, Leko missed e takes f4. Very unusual. So obviously you consider e4 first, but after queen e2, b3, bishop d4, knight goes back to e3, and black could be in very, very serious trouble. So while after e takes f4, if knight takes f4, bishop takes f4, then knight c5, and queen e2, rook e8, and black has a very, very decent game, because now when knight goes on e4, to play b3 will be impossible, and then knight on c4 is no longer solidly protected. So Leko played bishop d4, but then after knight c5, exchange on c5, queen c5, he played rook f1, rook h1 was better, but still black has a comfortable game. Rook h f1, rook f8, rook f4, g6, and he had to go to the end game, which was better for black, but Leko played quite resourcefully, and eventually the game, after mistakes on both sides, ended in a draw. But obviously white wanted more. White was not happy with this kind of development, and sooner or later they had to look at knight e2, the retreat, another retreat, which is creating far more complicated positions, and that's what was first considered when we analyzed this position, and that's where the main concept was yet to be shown. So let's now go to the most dangerous line, 11 knight e2.